wind the clock back a little bit here. So Vatican II and whether or not it actually taught anything definitively. So you said, I find it here, Consium 21, always bring up that this is a definitive teaching in the Second Vatican Council regarding the sacramentality of the episcopate. Now, Article 21 it's 2 paragraphs long. I don't want to read the entire thing here. You know, what exactly in there are you saying is like the definitive teaching? Did you know?
Well, yeah, it starts out, the Sacred Council teaches, that part right there. See if you can spot that real quick. I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I can probably pull it up here. But it starts, the Sacred Council teaches. Do you see that part?
And the Sacred Council teaches that by episcopal consecration, the fullness of the sacrament of orders is conferred. That fullness of power, namely, which both in the church's liturgical practice and in the language of the fathers of the church is called the high priesthood, the supreme power of the sacred ministry.
Yeah, that proposition would be definitively proposed by the Second Vatican Council and was not considered definitive prior to the Second Vatican Council.
Gotcha.
So we can speak about the church teaching something infallibly there at Vatican II.
So I love how there are like 18 subordinate clauses in this. So this is saying, if I can chop this down, the Sacred Council is teaching that episcopal consecration, by episcopal consecration, the fullness of the sacrament of orders is conferred the supreme power of the sacred ministry. So just
and it's distinct
is the supreme practice and like the pinnacle of power of ministry,
as opposed to the ordination of a priest. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Prior to that was a debated topic. I mean, is you know, they would kind of ask the question, I guess you could put it this way: is the ordination of bishop a higher or a weightier, if you will, receiving of the sacrament of ordination, or is it the same as the sacrament of ordination of the priesthood? Well, what they're wanting to say is no. The receiving of ordination for a bishop is the highest form of ordination, of the sacrament of ordination, and you know, the priesthood is a lower expression of it. But again, prior to Vatican II, that was debated, whereas after Vatican II, that's definitively proposed. And I would argue it's definitively proposed, number one, by the relative language, relatively solemn language that's used there. The Sacred Council teaches. That's relatively solemn language for Vatican II. Now, it wouldn't be a dogma. It would be what we would call Catholic doctrine, a secondary object of infallibility. But those can still be taught infallibly, and I would say that was taught there. Number two, if you look at Paul VI, Pope Paul VI, there at Vatican II, I think it was the speech in the opening speech of the third session, I believe, he mentions that the council in Lumen Gentium 20, he doesn't name paragraph 21, but it's what he's talking about. He says the council is going to decide this issue about the episcopate in a way that could no longer be challenged. Now, what does that mean, in a way that could no longer be challenged? Is he talking about could no longer be challenged tentatively or definitively? I think he means definitively, and that's the way a lot of other people understood it. So I would say those are indications that Vatican II defined, well, yeah, you could say defined something there definitively.
Okay, well, since I have Mr. Nuance himself, I'm gonna tee up an argument here to try and say you're wrong. Okay,
let's hear it.
So you're saying that Lumen Gentium 21 is an example of something that was definitively taught. Now, you said maybe not dogma, but you're saying maybe it's a doctrine.
It's definitely not dogma, but as Catholic doctrine, which is an object of infallibility. Secondary objects are objects of infallibility. Yeah,
we're going to put that right here. I want to come back to that and talk about that.
Okay.
So I referenced earlier how the appendix specifically says what is declared to be believed by everyone. So in the appendix, taking conciliar custom into consideration and also the pastoral purpose of the present council, The Sacred Council defines as binding on the church only those things that matter in faith and morals, which it shall openly declare to be binding.
There you go.
So
that's the key.
Faith and
right
morals, and it has to say that it's binding.
That's the key. Openly declare to be binding. That's key.
Okay. So declared to be binding. I did not see binding anywhere in Lumen Gentium 21.
Sure.
However, in Lumen Gentium 14, the bonds which bind men to the church in a visible way are profession of faith, the sacraments, and ecclesial government and communion. So I feel like that is definitively taught then, because it binds you to the church, and the church says this binds you. Like, this is something we are declaring to be emphatically must be believed.
But you can openly declare that something is binding without using that language verbatim, right? I mean, you can communicate that by way of the language that's used, that it would become clear that that's the intention. And I would say when it uses the term, when it uses the phrase, I should say, the Sacred Council teaches, that's historically been considered language that would indicate a solemn definition.
Okay.
That's how that's historically been understood.
So maybe
the Sacred Council teaches, the Sacred Council proposes. You can see that kind of language in Trent for definitive teaching. So whenever you hear that, you should automatically think this is possibly a definition. And in fact, that's how Paul VI understood it, and quite a few other theologians understood it.
So maybe when the appendix says, like, these are the things that are binding, like, yes, these are things that are binding. There may be other things that are binding, and we're not emphatically defining them right now, but there may be other things. But these emphatically are. And so that's the thing I just read from, what was it, 17?
Yeah, and I think that this is one of them, paragraph 21. But if somebody were to come and say, okay, well, I don't think that was definitively proposed, although I would give a lot of pushback on it, it's not a deal breaker at the end of the day. Okay, at the very least, though, one has to give religious submission of intellect and will, and an extremely high version of it. In other words, nobody could dissent from it, right? But we could question whether or not this could be reformed in the future. And I don't think that it could be reformed. I think this was an irreformable teaching. But if somebody just really pushed back and said, no, I think it could be reformed in the future, but I tentatively give submission of intellect.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's fine.